I never imagined a quiet suburban street could turn into a nightmare, but that's exactly what happened the day HOA. Karen crossed every line, and my 13-year-old niece got caught in the middle. One moment we were living in peace. The next, chaos erupted over rules no one should ever enforce. Fines, threats, and petty power plays were one thing. But this was something far more shocking. What would drive someone to put a child in danger for the sake of control? And how far would justice really go when the law and a ruthless neighbor collide? Drop your location and comment. Let's see how far this story reaches around the world. Our family moved to this quiet suburban street hoping for a fresh start. The kind of neighborhood where children ride bikes without fear. Neighbors greet each other with waves. And every lawn looks like it belongs in a magazine. My 13-year-old niece, full of energy and curiosity, was thrilled to explore every corner of our block. Life felt safe, predictable, perfect. I had always taken pride in maintaining our home. Tidy garden, freshly painted porch, and a mailbox that never leaned a fraction too far. Everything seemed ordinary, almost boring in the best possible way. Little did I know, this ordinary life would soon spiral into chaos over rules that no one could have imagined. Enforcing. Enter HOA Karen. At first, she seemed like any other neighbor, polite, organized, and helpful, but there was something in her eyes, a quiet intensity, that hinted she measured everything and everyone. She monitored the neighborhood like a hawk, not missing a single misplaced gnome, crooked hedge, or slightly uneven driveway. And while most people shrugged off her nitpicking, I would learn that her obsession with control went far beyond harmless perfectionism. The first hint of trouble came on a Saturday morning when my niece set up a lemonade stand in our front yard. Just a small, innocent project to enjoy the sunshine. Within minutes, Karen appeared across the street, clipboard in hand, her expression sharp and unyielding. "This isn't allowed," she said, pointing at the stand as if it were evidence of a serious crime. Thought it was a misunderstanding, maybe a warning, but Karen's presence, her tone, and the way she scrutinized our home made it clear this was more than a petty rule. This was a statement. She controlled the neighborhood, and anyone stepping out of line would face her scrutiny. Tiny. After the lemonade stand incident, life didn't return to normal. If anything, it felt like we had stepped into a pressure cooker. HO Karen seemed to appear everywhere at once, her presence like a shadow over our home. Letters arrived in the mailbox almost daily, fines for improperly trimmed hedges, unauthorized lawn, decorations, and even for obstructing community aesthetics. Each one was more absurd than the last, but ignoring them wasn't an option. Every day the tension grew, gnawing at our nerves. One evening, I watched from the window as she patrolled the street in her bright minivan, clipboard in hand. Her eyes scanned every property as if she were a judge passing verdicts. When she finally stopped in front of our house, my stomach sank. The confrontation wasn't just personal, it was performative. She called the HOA president on speakerphone, describing our property as a blight and demanding immediate action. My niece, unaware of the storm brewing, waved from the porch, smiling innocently, and I felt a surge of anger and fear. We tried to reason with her. Emails, polite requests, even phone calls. But HOA Karen had mastered the art of twisting logic. Every compromise we offered was met with new rules, new threats, and new citations. The more we tried to stay calm, the more she escalated. Her letters began referencing minor things from years ago, like a slightly chipped mailbox post or a faded flower pot, as though nothing in our past could ever earn our forgiveness. The tension spread beyond our yard. Neighbors whispered in hushed tones, unsure whether to intervene or stay out of her way. One family had their driveway inspected 3 times in a single week. Another had been forced to remove a simple wind chime. The petty enforcement had created a climate of fear. But for us, it hit closer to home. My niece was scared to play outside. My spouse walked on eggshells, and I was constantly calculating how to respond without giving Karen more ammunition. It all came to a head one weekend during the HOA board meeting. We knew she would be there, clipboard at the ready, armed with a list of violations she had prepared just for us. The room was tense. every neighbor silently holding their breath as she laid out our so-called offenses. "You are undermining the community's standards," she said sharply, pointing at me. "This is not acceptable." Her tone was cold, almost triumphant. I tried to defend my family, to explain that these were minor, harmless things, but she interrupted at every turn, quoting rules that seemed nonsensical and bending the bylaws to fit her narrative. The board members, who usually maintained order, seemed wary of challenging her. Her control over the HOA was absolute, and our frustration turned into helplessness. Then came the incident that would change everything. My niece had left her bike on the sidewalk for just a few minutes. Karen spotted it, called over another board member, and insisted it constituted a public obstruction, threatening a fine. My niece tried to explain that she had only paused to tie her shoes, but Karen dismissed her entirely, her eyes scanning for anyone who might support us. When I stepped forward, the air grew thick with tension. This wasn't about rules anymore. It was about dominance, intimidation, and fear. We began documenting everything. Every letter, every phone call, every unnecessary citation, pictures, videos, timestamps, anything that could demonstrate the harassment. But even armed with evidence, the emotional toll was enormous. Each day brought new anxiety. Every knock at the door or car stopping on the street sent my heart racing. We were fighting not just for our property, but for a sense of safety and dignity that had been stolen. Then came the inspection day, a Saturday I will never forget. Karen arrived unannounced, clipboard in hand, insisting she needed to review compliance personally. My niece was outside, collecting leaves from the garden, oblivious to the approaching storm. Karen's voice cut through the air like ice. "Step aside! This is a violation!" My niece froze, confusion and fear written all over her face. I felt a surge of protective anger, my mind racing for the right words. The righteous. Neighbors peeked from their windows, some sympathetic, some cautious. Karen's glare swept across them like a warning. None dared interfere. And in that moment, I realized this had become about more than petty rules or garden aesthetics. This was a battle for control, for fear, and she had escalated to targeting a child. My blood ran cold. What was supposed to be a peaceful, ordinary life had spiraled into a nightmare where my niece was vulnerable, and the law seemed powerless or unwilling to intervene. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, a message arrived that made my heart stop. It wasn't a letter this time. It was a text from Karen herself, a cryptic, chilling warning that made it clear she would stop at nothing. And in that moment, I understood the terrifying truth. This wasn't just about lawn rules, fines, or petty complaints. This was about power, and we were in the crosshairs. It all came to a head on a humid Thursday evening. During a neighborhood meeting I had dreaded for weeks, Karen arrived as usual, clipboard in hand, her eyes scanning the room for anyone who dared defy her. I felt my chest tighten. My niece clung to my side, frightened and silent. This time, though, I wasn't going to stand by. She began her usual tirade, rattling off every violation she claimed we had committed, each more absurd than the last. My hands shook, but I refused to back down. I had documented every fine, every petty rule, and every intimidation tactic, and now, armed with the evidence, I pushed back. One by one, I dismantled her accusations, calmly presenting dates, photos, and witness statements. The room went silent. Karen's confident smirk faltered. Her voice, once sharp and commanding, wavered. She tried to regain control, but her words sounded hollow, almost desperate. The neighbors, who had once whispered in fear, were now leaning forward, their expressions shifting from hesitation to awe. Then came the moment that changed everything. Karen, desperate to assert dominance, made a shocking move. She attempted to accuse my niece of endangering the community, a baseless claim meant to terrify us into submission. My heart stopped as I realized the stakes, but I held my ground, calling out the absurdity of the claim and demanding accountability. The board, finally seeing the truth in black and white, began to question her authority. The room erupted in tension. Karen's facade cracked, and in a final, dramatic gesture, she stormed out, leaving her clipboard and her influence behind. The air seemed to shift. For the first time, I felt a glimmer of relief. My niece hugged me tightly, tears streaming down her face, and I realized that what we had endured was over. But the consequences of her actions would linger. After the dramatic showdown with HOA Karen, life in our neighborhood slowly began to shift, but it wasn't immediate. And it certainly wasn't easy. My niece, once full of carefree energy, became wary of her surroundings, scanning the street nervously whenever she played outside. I knew that no amount of reassurance could erase the fear that had been forced upon her. The HOA board, shaken by the evidence we presented, called for a review of their policies and Karen's conduct. Neighbors began speaking out, sharing stories of petty fines, harassment, and overreach. Children now had space to play without fear, and families felt empowered to speak up against injustice. Karen, meanwhile, tried to maintain her grip, but the power she once wielded so effortlessly was slipping. The board voted to place restrictions on her authority, limiting her influence over neighborhood enforcement. Discussions about fairness, transparency, and accountability became central in community meetings. Parents advocated for clearer guidelines. Neighbors collaborated on conflict resolution strategies, and slowly, a culture of vigilance against abuse of power started to take root. On a personal level, I discovered something profound about resilience and community. Standing up to Karen required patience, meticulous documentation, and courage in the face of fear. Over time, the yard was reclaimed. My niece laughed freely, and the shadow of Karen's influence diminished. The final lesson was clear. Unchecked authority can become dangerous when combined with ego and obsession. Communities must remain alert, and residents must be willing to question, challenge, and document abuses. I often wonder, what would you do if someone crossed every line to assert control over your life? Would you stay silent, or would you fight and make your voice heard?